Ask Reddit, what's an experience you've deemed supernatural and cannot find a rational explanation for? When I was a kid I was putting on gel in front of the mirror. My bedroom door was locked. When I finished I tried placing the lid back on the jar with my sticky gel hands. I dropped it and hit my foot and it slid under the bed. I was like, F. And dried my hands with a little towel. Then, as I was bending over to pick the lid from under the bed, it slid back out. On its own. I didn't panic or anything, but I did look under the bed and there was absolutely nothing where it could have bounced off of. Also, by the time I reached for it, it wouldn't make sense either way. It's not a scary or interesting story with poltergeist activity and humanoid characters, but I always think about it. What was it? What pushed the lid back out? I'll never have an answer. During the Bush War in Zimbabwe in the 70s, most civilian road travel was in convoys escorted by armed police or army. There was an armed vehicle in the front of the convoy, one at the back and one roving along the line of cars. By far there was a cop driving the roving vehicle in a convoy going from Bulawayo to the South African border at Beitbridge. At some point, they were doing a vehicle count and noticed there was one vehicle missing. They rechecked against the list of registrations and sure enough one car wasn't there. They radioed back to Gwanda and a vehicle was dispatched to see if somehow one had broken down and nobody had noticed. Nothing. Shortly afterwards, they received a message that the vehicle had been found. It had pulled up to the police station in Messina, which was about half an hour beyond the border in South Africa. The bewildered driver could not explain how he went from being in the middle of a line of cars to being several hundred miles away, on the other side of the border. The family's passports were checked and there were no immigration stamps or indication they had been through the border post. He swore this was true. I choose to believe him because, man, what a weird story. So, many years ago I was dating a girl. Now, that's supernatural in and of itself, but there's more. I cared for her deeply. First relationships will do that to you, but she was in a bad way. Too much partying, too many drugs, hanging with what is absolutely the wrong crowd, and some very illegal shit after she broke up with me that I'm really not comfortable discussing. A couple of years go by, I think of her on occasion and hope she's doing better, but not terribly often. Then one night I have the dream. In it she's standing by my bed and reassuring me that everything is okay, she's better now, and there's no need to worry about her anymore. Odd dream. But I don't think much of it until 2 days later when I catch sight of a newspaper with a story about having found who had gone missing. She had on heroin the night I had the dream. She wasn't a saint, but she'd also come up a bad way and, according to what mutual friends had relayed to me, I'd been one of the few people who really cared about her. I don't really have an explanation for what happened, but I like to think that she wanted to make sure I knew she was going to be alright. It's part of what leaves me firmly believing in some sort of afterlife. I have an old TV my parents bought way back in 1986, when they were living in Germany. When I was little, that TV was retired from the main family TV to the basement TV, and my bedroom was in the basement. I very clearly remember waking up in the middle of the night, frequently and randomly, for years, and laying down on the couch in front of that TV. It would turn itself on and play music for me so I could fall asleep on the couch. As I've grown older, moved from place to place with it, it's done other things. Turning on to full screeching static when my toaster caught fire while I was in another room, or dramatically turning off and not coming back on when I've been awake for too long. Weird shit, really. I don't know what's up with it, or inside it. But there's something in there, and it's my oldest and most loyal friend. I had just moved into my first apartment. It was a very small studio in a not-so-great neighborhood. I was 21. I started noticing things going missing after a couple of weeks. a nice pair of underwear, a charm bracelet, things I thought maybe I left somewhere or lost or misplaced. Until I noticed a picture of me and my friend I had on my fridge was gone. I was perplexed. I turned my apartment upside down. No picture. Over the course of the year, little things would just disappear. I even went to the office and asked how many employees had access to my apartment. The office manager showed me the safe with the keys and showed me the log of who takes what key when. None of the dates added up to missing items. I was perplexed. I was about 2 weeks from moving out because my lease was up and I was moving in with my boyfriend. A storm came in and damaged the apartment building, roof and vac. Maintenance let me know they'd be coming in to replace ductwork and replenish insulation. The guys come in, go in my bedroom closet, and lo and behold, there's a panel leading to this weird attic space that spans the entire half of the apartment, 4 homes. I had no idea it was there and the maintenance guys assure me that it's only accessible from my apartment. I decided to poke my head up and look about while they were up there. In the back corner above my bedroom, was what I can only describe as a shrine of my stuff. My underwear, picture, jewelry, all of my missing items. All together. Placed in a triangle. I got so freaked out I just left it all there. I moved into my boyfriend's house that night. I had him and his friends move my things for me so I didn't have to go back. I told the apartment manager but she didn't seem to care at all. I get physically ill when I talk about it still because I know someone was watching me that whole time and I had no clue. In the middle of the 90s we visited some family at their farm in another country, and the place was super rural, like they had some pipe coming out of the side of some mountain for fresh water and one of these dumpster toilets that are actually just a hole in the ground, and if it's full, they throw earth on it and dig a new one. So, it was in the middle of summer and super frigging hot, even at night. I had awoken around 3 AM because I needed to take a leak and went outside to go to that little shithole in the ground. There was nearly no electric light outside, so no light pollution, just a brilliant starlit sky all over and around me. So I looked up and let it sink in and just enjoyed the moment, when suddenly a thick, fat, gleaming light beam raced from left to right over the sky, stopped freaking in the middle, hung there for about 0.51 s and then raced off to the right. The whole thing lasted for less than 2s, but it left me dumbfounded. I was never a big UFO believer, but damn, what the fuck was that? When a strange force pulled me 12 blocks through my small town one night, I just sort of felt like walking, and as I went on the impulse got stronger until I could tell exactly where I was going. The location had zero significant relevance to me or my life, and when I got to one end of the field there was a small black figure sitting in the spot I felt I was supposed to go. I realized how weird the situation was and sprinted all the way home. It was super strange, and 6 years later I've never had anything at all similar happen. It started by meditating in a dark space on my porch. In some East European legends, this is how vampires attract their victims. They've came across before. I grew up in my grandparents' house, which was an extremely old house that used to operate as a store. It was later converted to a house and then my grandparents bought it. One day my grandma and I are sitting in the kitchen, I'm reading a book and she was perusing a magazine, when we hear a sound loud and clear. The sound of cowboy boots walking around in the room above us. Very distinct footfalls, and they couldn't be confused with another sound, if you know what cowboy boots on hardwood floors sound like. My grandma and I look up at one another and I remember whispering to her I thought we were the only ones home. We were the only ones home at the time and I was never comfortable in that house by myself again, especially since my bedroom was upstairs next to the empty one with the footsteps. Used to work hospice care. A woman who was dying of a brain tumor had 2 Siamese cats she adored. She had pictures on her wall and while lucid, would tell me about them often. The night she passed, I called hospice and waited in the living room. It was summer and the front screen door was open. I look over and see two identical Siamese cats sitting there. Thinking I'd lost my mind, I took a picture of them. They were real. Her cats had passed 8 years before. I'm a rational and logical person and think there's a rational and logical explanation for most ghostly phenomenon. I cannot explain those cats. Okay, this is a story I've never been able to explain, but this is the perfect thread to share it. There was a big creek behind my neighbor/friend's house. It was basically a natural stream that had been turned into a glorified sewer drain. It was all surrounded by houses. The creek ran down through this hilly, partially wooded field up to this very small underpass. On one side was a very large drain for rainwater from the adjacent street. When dry, the mouth of the drain was a wide flat concrete slab. My friends and I used to play here all the time. It was pretty picturesque, all things considered, with a small natural waterfall that spilled into a deep pool that continued through the underpass. One time I went down there with my friend, and we saw something at the drain's mouth, on the concrete. It was like this ... weird thing. It was dead, roughly the shape of maybe a baby raccoon, but completely hairless, a little bloated, probably from being dead, and this weird fleshy blue color. It was covered in a clear watery slime and there was this puddle pooling around it, but the drain and area around it was bone dry. It had 6 limbs that ended in small little hoof-like appendages, a scrawny, thin tail, a mouth that was like this very rounded muzzle with small slits for nostrils and what appeared to be 4 closed eyes, and small rounded ears, think like a hamster's. There wasn't a mark on it, no scratches or anything, but it was dead. My friend and I freaked out like, WTF is this? Well, my dad had a really nice camera and I said we should go get it and take a picture. In retrospect, one of us should have stayed the butt. We were like 9 and 10. So we go back to my house and start telling my parents about this weird thing by the creek, and we got to take a picture of it, and my dad was instantly interested because I wasn't the kind to exaggerate this much. So he takes the camera and follows us to the creek ... and the thing is gone. The stain of the puddle is still there. There's no signs the puddle was disturbed, like maybe it rolled into the creek or an animal came by to snack on it. But this thing is just gone. My friend and I are in shock and swear it was just right here. As we're talking, this old guy who lived in one of the houses nearest this part of the creek, and had a view of it, came up to us and said he saw us looking at something, then go away, and while we were gone this guy in a nice black suit came out to the spot we were looking at, picked something up, and walked away. Well, the suit guy made him suspicious enough to come down and see what was going on. I don't remember what really happened after that. Just that my friend and I were insistent on what we'd seen but got dismissed by the adults. I've always tried to dismiss this as I saw some weird roadkill of a baby raccoon or something that got washed through the drain. But then why was it completely hairless? And so blue? It wasn't cold outside. This was the dead of Midwestern summer, and why did a guy in a black suit supposedly take it away? When I was in middle school I lived on a hill that had a graveyard on it. I had a friend who pulled all-nighters with me. In summer it's light here pretty much all night, so it was never creepy. As we were heading down the hill, I don't know why, but I glanced back and saw a little girl in a white dress. This was around 2 or 3 a.m. I stopped and she walked into the woods, which the graveyard was like 100 yards away from. I asked my friend if he saw her and he did. We both thought it was weird, so we went up to see where she went but saw no sign of her. 3 years later I have a class in high school with a teacher who loved local ghost stories, so every Friday he tells us 1 or 2 new ones. Then he talks about the girl at the hill cemetery and it snaps back to me. I got chills from the thought. My friends and I decide to visit the graveyard at night because we were dumb and young, generally creepy, so one tried to spook us by hiding. 5 minutes later he walks up looking pale, asking to leave, points to the woods saying a little girl just tried talking to him, and I felt like we were being watched from the trees. When I was little I used to sit and draw at this small table we had in front of a window. From this window we could see into our front yard and the street at the edge of it. One day I'm doing my usual coloring while my dad is in the front yard talking to my uncles. When I peeked out I saw a very young looking white man wearing a mechanic's jumpsuit walk from behind my neighbor's house and into our yard. I remember I stopped coloring to watch him. He walked behind my uncle and disappeared behind our home. I was scared at that point, thinking he was a robber or something worse. Right when I was about to run for the front door, he reappeared. This time he walked from the other side of our home and up to the road. He looked both ways before continuing down the street. When my dad came back in, I asked him why didn't he stop that man from walking in our yard. He told me he didn't see any man and he thought I imagined it. It made no sense. I remember seeing him vividly. I remember feeling genuine fear when he walked behind our home. But my dad and uncles didn't see him at all. I don't have any type of schizophrenia or other disorder. And I wasn't prone to hallucinate as a child. I always wonder if it was just my imagination after all. But it felt too real to be that. Edit, I wanted to come back and talk about a few points. Someone said that he could be checking the electric meter. My family still lives in the same house. The electric meter is located in the front yard. And as I said, he was wearing a mechanic's jumpsuit. I'm familiar with that type of wear because my grandfather and his brother have owned a shop since the 80s, so I've grown up around people in that profession. In the area I live, anyone who works for the city wear a specific type of clothing and always ride in a truck. They'd never just walk into a yard. And if they did, they would have interacted with my dad and at least make themselves known. My dad and my uncles did not look at him or even acknowledge him. Great question. I don't really believe in ghosts, but a whole bunch of weird, unexplained stuff went down in one house I lived in growing up. Nothing like it happened before or since that place. One time, my sister and I were sitting in the living room, and an antique clock from the 1800s sitting on the mantel chimed a few times for one of the hours. That clock hadn't been wound or had the hands move at all in several decades, nor had it been moved or settled in years. There's no way a gear just happened to turn over after all that time. We turned white looking at each other. Another time, my whole family was sitting in the family room watching TV, and there were 3 loud distinct knocks on an interior door in the hallway. My mom said, "I guess that's Ralph visiting us," with a straight face. Ralph was the former owner who died within a few weeks of moving out of the place. No idea what makes 3 loud knocks on a door. Not a fun experience. I used to hear what sounded exactly like footsteps moving around the house at night. This was not regular creaking or settling. It was clearly moving down hallways. Usually I would get a little bit scared. One night I was actually counting loud steps moving towards my room, and it clearly sounded like someone stopped in the hallway outside my room. This time I wasn't scared, I was annoyed. I got up with the intention of complaining to a family member that it was really annoying that they were walking around the house in the dark at night, and I opened the door, and there was no one there. Freaked me out. I'm as skeptical about supernatural stuff as anyone, but these things happened, with no reasonable explanation. I'm glad nothing like this has ever happened anywhere else I've loved since then. For over 2 years after his death, my partner continued to receive texts from her dead son. The texts arrived on average at least once a week, and usually at moments she felt at her lowest. The texts were mostly the same: "Love you, see you soon." This phenomena occurred with 3 different phones my partner had over this time. Her son's phone was kept in a drawer at his sister's. It was chipless and no longer working. Once, and nothing like this has ever happened since. I disappeared for 45 minutes. TLDR, I have a bad memory and no recollection of my lost time. Nobody knew where I was, and to this day I still have no idea what happened. Sorry, this is going to be a bit long. Some backstory: I've always had a terrible memory, my whole life, so missing time for me isn't abnormal. Same thing with not remembering numbers, names, faces, or entire conversations I've had. Also, this happened in middle school. I've always had great grades and was somewhat of a teacher's pet, was never in trouble, and didn't have any real friends. I graduated top of my class for the 3 years I went there. Now what I thought was weird was that I distinctly remember walking down the stairs to my next class, music. I don't remember the next class, and the next thing I remember is I'm going down the same stairs except with my backpack this time, heading to the bus. NBD, right? I get home and do the usual. The next day is where things get interesting. My music teacher spots me in the hall. She totally starts chewing me out for missing class yesterday. Going on about how it was the second time and if it happens again I'm going to be in big trouble for skipping classes. Remember when I said I was a good kid? Yeah, I don't remember ever missing her class before either. Anyway, she didn't believe me when I told her I was there and I had no idea what she was talking about. I'm genuinely curious now, as I'm used to missing time, but it normally only affects me. I launch an entire investigation, I mean full-out notebook, retracing steps I remember, asking classmates, teachers, even not mine, the principal, and the nurse. There was only one other place I could have been. Study hall was the class you were forced to take if you opted out of music. Well, the teacher in charge of that study hall said he never saw me after I left to go to music. Same thing with my classmates in the class. Nobody saw me. None of the teachers, no students from other grades. The nurse, whose office is right at the bottom of the stairs, not a soul. But I was back again before the end of the school day. Now before you ask, no, I couldn't have left. There were alarms on all the doors besides the main office door, which is guarded by a glassed-in front desk lady who would have seen me, and all the doors are locked, so even if I'd made it outside I wouldn't have made it back in. If teachers aren't in their rooms, they lock the doors. And while I went to a small school, there's no way I could have hidden in a bathroom for that long without anyone noticing. The music class was held in the gym and the small cafeteria hosted our art room, which had a class in it. To this day I have no idea what happened for those 45 minutes and it's been 10 years. If I ever got to ask anyone question about my life, I'd like to know what happened. Also, I feel like this fits here because while there has to be a rational explanation, I'm a skeptic. I just can't figure it out. I've just decided to tell people I was abducted. This one time during 6th grade, I went back to Taiwan with my family to visit my grandparents. It was maybe 2 in the morning when I randomly woke up. My mom and younger brother sleep in the same room as me. I share a bed with mom and my bro sleeps on a separate mattress next to us. No bed frames, just floor mattresses, but when I woke, I took a look around and they were both gone, their blankets folded at the edge and all. I thought to myself, did they go back to grandma's place? My grandparents live in the same neighborhood of apartments but in building B, and we live in A, so it's like maybe a 1.5-minute walk plus elevator ride. Anyway, I thought it was super odd but didn't really question it because my grandma had a habit of watching dramas until like midnight, but it was still weird that they would go back to her place and not wake me up. So I literally slipped on my slides and walked across to building B, took the elevator to the 12th floor where grandparents lived, and I was a bit shaken because all the lights were off. Weird Asian ghost vibes, creepy F, and I tried opening the door, usually unlocked, and it was locked. I then panicked because I was like, what the F if they aren't here, where the F are they? So I walked back to building A, took the elevator to 9th floor and realized that I fucking locked myself out because the door is on self-lock mode. Now I'm really panicking, but I remembered that there was a security guard downstairs, so I took the elevator back down, heart beating like mad, and I ran up to the security guard who luckily recognized me, and asked me why I was out here. I quickly explained how I locked myself out and I don't remember my mum's phone number and went off on this tangent, and this man literally went okay 1 second and dialed up to my home. I started crying and went on to explain how my mum wasn't home so no one's gonna pick up, but someone picked up. Now I'm stunned. He's talking on the phone and he's like, yeah, your daughter is down here, PLS come collect her, and I'm like, what? There. Actual. Fuck. My mom comes down and I'm like, you were home? She's like, why are you down here? I explained to her the entire situation, and apparently both her and my brother were asleep and that I must have dreamt it or walked. But I know for a fact I was awake. I did not hallucinate. I even smoothed the damn blankets and was like, wow, it's so nicely folded. The next day we tried to decipher this bizarre situation but never came to a conclusion. FYI, our apartment door is a heavy metal door, and because of the acoustics of the apartment hall, when you close the door it makes a super loud clang. My mom being a light sleeper, it was super odd she didn't hear me close the door or even just getting up. To this day, it's been 9-10 years. I can still recall the incident super clearly, and it's still a mystery to me. TLDR, I went on a spooky ass journey because I thought my mom and brother didn't return from visiting my grandparents. Turns out they were sleeping next to me the entire time. We share a room, and I for some reason didn't see them and they think I hallucinated or sleepwalked, but I know for a fact I was wide awake and it remains an unsolved mystery.